Let me ask you to go to a specific place in your memory. It is a Friday night, or perhaps a Saturday. The day of the week doesn't truly matter, but the feeling does. You are in a room full of people. Perhaps it is a dinner party, a crowded bar with sticky floors and loud laughter, or maybe just a busy coffee shop where the espresso machine hisses and steam rises in the afternoon light. Look around you. There are voices everywhere. The air is thick with conversation. There is the clinking of glass, the rhythm of stories being told, the shared nods of understanding between friends. On the surface, you are part of this. You are physically present. You occupy space. Someone might even be talking to you right now, their mouth moving, their eyes expecting a reaction. But inside, you are drifting in the middle of a dark, silent ocean. Have you ever noticed that specific physical sensation that hits you when you are surrounded by others, yet completely untouched by them? It starts in the chest, a hollow, dull ache, sitting right behind the sternum. It's not sharp like a knife. It's heavy, like a stone that has been swallowed and refuses to dissolve. You smile. You nod. You make the appropriate noises of social agreement. You say, "That's crazy," or "I know what you mean," but you are performing. You are watching the scene from behind a pane of thick, soundproof glass. You can see their lips moving, you can see the warmth in their cheeks, but you cannot feel the heat. You are a ghost in a machine made of flesh and blood. And then comes the walk home. That moment when you step out of the noise and into the cool night air. The door closes behind you, muffling the music. You check your phone. The screen glows, a harsh, artificial blue light illuminating your face. No notifications. Or perhaps there are notifications, but they are shallow. Likes, algorithm updates, meaningless noise. You enter your apartment. You hear the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of a clock ticking, or the distant wail of a siren in the city. And you realize, with a terrifying clarity, that the silence of the empty room feels less lonely than the noise of the crowd you just left. This is the paradox we need to talk about today. It is the great, unspoken epidemic of our modern existence. We are the most connected species in history. We are wired into a global nervous system that never sleeps. Yet, so many of us, perhaps even you, listening to this right now, feel an isolation so profound it feels like a physical weight. Why does it feel like you are speaking a language no one else understands? Why does the world feel like a party you were invited to, but where no one knows your name? Let's sit with this feeling for a moment. Let's not run from it. Let's understand it. First, I need you to take a breath. A real one. Let the air fill that hollow space in your chest. If what I just described resonated with you, I need you to know something fundamental. You are not broken. You are not a social failure. You are not bad at being a human being. There is a pervasive narrative in our culture that treats loneliness as a defect. We look at the person eating alone at the restaurant, or the person walking by the river with headphones on, and society whispers, "What is wrong with them? Why aren't they popular? Why aren't they surrounded by a tribe?" We internalize this. We begin to believe that our loneliness is a verdict on our lovability. We tell ourselves, if I were funnier, if I were better looking, if I were smarter, I wouldn't feel this way. We treat loneliness like a shameful secret, something to be hidden away in the attic of our minds. But here is the truth. Loneliness is not a lack of social skills. It is often a sign of high emotional intelligence and deep sensitivity. You see, to feel lonely in a crowd requires a specific kind of perception. It means you are not satisfied with the surface. It means you crave depth. While others might be content with small talk, with discussing the weather, the sports scores, or the latest celebrity gossip, your soul is starving for something real. You are lonely because you are looking for a connection that bypasses the mask and touches the core. You are looking for what psychologists call resonance. You want to be seen, not just looked at. You want to be heard, not just listened to. The fact that you feel this pain means your internal guidance system is working perfectly. It is telling you that the connections you currently have are not feeding you. It is a hunger signal. Imagine you are starving for nutrients, and someone hands you a plate of plastic fruit. It looks real. It's colorful. It's shiny. Everyone else seems to be enjoying their plastic fruit. They are pretending to eat it, pretending to be full. But you take a bite, and you know it's fake. You spit it out. You remain hungry. Does that make you broken? No. It makes you discerning. It makes you a seeker of truth in a world that is often comfortable with the artificial. Many of the people I speak to who struggle with this are what I call the deep feelers. They are the ones who notice the way the light hits the floor in the afternoon. They are the ones who feel the mood of a room change before a word is spoken. If this is you, your loneliness is a byproduct of your depth. You have a vast inner ocean, and it is difficult to find someone who knows how to swim that deep without drowning. So, please, put down the judgment. Put down the shame. You are not alone in your loneliness. It is a shared human experience, as old as consciousness itself. Now, let's strip away the poetry for a moment and look at the machinery. Why does loneliness hurt? I don't mean hurt metaphorically. I mean, why does it physically manifest as pain in your body? Neuroscience gives us a fascinating, if somewhat startling, answer. When researchers place people in fMRI machines and trigger feelings of social rejection or intense loneliness, the part of the brain that lights up is the anterior cingulate cortex. This is the exact same region of the brain that processes physical pain. To your brain, a broken heart or deep isolation registers almost identically to a broken leg. Why? To understand this, we have to go back, way back, to the days when we lived on the savannah. In our evolutionary history, being alone was not just an inconvenience, it was a death sentence. If you were separated from the tribe, you were vulnerable to predators, to starvation, to the elements. You could not survive the night alone. Therefore, nature evolved a warning system. Just as your hand instinctively recoils from a hot stove to save your skin, your brain creates emotional agony when you drift too far from the tribe to save your life. Loneliness is a biological alarm bell. It is your nervous system screaming, "You are unsafe. Find your people. Return to the group." This brings us to the concept of nervous system regulation. Humans are an obligatory gregarious species. We regulate each other's nervous systems. When you are with someone you trust, someone with whom you share a safe attachment, your heart rate slows, your cortisol levels drop, and your brain releases oxytocin and dopamine. This is called co-regulation. When you are chronically lonely, you are in a state of constant physiological hyperarousal. Your body is flooded with cortisol because, on a primal level, it believes a saber-toothed tiger is lurking in the shadows. You are sleeping with one eye open. This is why loneliness is so exhausting. You are running a marathon of survival while sitting perfectly still on your couch. But here is the modern twist, the cruel joke of the 21st century. We try to soothe this ancient hunger with modern tools, social media. Psychologists refer to digital interactions, likes, comments, scrolling, as social snacking. Imagine you are dehydrated, desperate for water. Social media gives you a thimble of salt water. It mimics connection. It gives you a tiny, fleeting hit of dopamine, but it lacks the nutritional value of true presence. It lacks the eye contact, the pheromones, the tone of voice, the vulnerability that triggers the release of oxytocin. So we end up in a dopamine loop. We feel lonely, so we check our phones. We see curated images of other people's perfect lives. This triggers our social comparison theory circuits, making us feel inferior and more isolated. The brain gets the signal that everyone else is part of the tribe except me. The alarm bell rings louder. We scroll more to numb it. We get lonelier. Furthermore, we must talk about the default mode network, DMN. This is the network in the brain that activates when we aren't doing a specific task, when we are just thinking. In lonely people, the DMN goes into overdrive. It begins to ruminate. It replays awkward conversations from 5 years ago. It obsesses over why that person didn't text back. A lonely brain is a hyperactive brain. It is scanning for threats, analyzing social cues with a negative bias, and turning inward to devour itself. You aren't just alone. You are trapped in a room with your harshest critic, and the volume is turned up to maximum. This leads us to the most painful part of our journey today, the paradox. You would think that if a person is starving for connection, they would reach out. You would think they would run toward people with open arms. But if you have lived this, you know that is not what happens. When deep loneliness sets in, a strange and terrible defense mechanism activates. We call this the Porcupine Dilemma. Imagine a cold winter night. A group of porcupines huddle together for warmth. But as they get close, their quills prick each other. The pain forces them to pull apart. But then they get cold again, so they move closer. They are caught in a cycle of freezing or bleeding. When you are lonely, your sensitivity to social rejection becomes incredibly acute. You become hypervigilant. Let's paint a scenario. You are invited to a gathering. You want to go? You desperately want to feel connected. But as the time approaches, your brain, flooded with that survival cortisol, starts whispering scenarios of danger. What if you have nothing to say? What if you stand in the corner looking awkward? What if they only invited you out of pity? The threat of rejection feels so dangerous that the safety of isolation feels like the better option. So, you cancel. You send the text, "Sorry, I'm not feeling well." And in that moment, you feel a wave of relief. The anxiety vanishes. But 10 minutes later, the relief is replaced by a crushing wave of sorrow. You are safe, yes, but you are alone. Again. This is the tragedy. The lonely person builds walls to protect themselves, but those same walls keep out the very love that could save them. It manifests in self-protective behavior. You might become cynical. You might tell yourself, "I hate people. People are shallow. I prefer being alone." You might wear a mask of indifference. You sit in the coffee shop with headphones on, staring at a laptop, radiating an energy that says, "Stay away." While your heart is screaming, "Please, someone, ask me what I'm reading." We must also acknowledge the exhaustion. We call this emotional fatigue. Trying to connect when you feel disconnected is hard work. It requires masking. You have to manually operate the controls of your facial expressions. You have to calculate your laughter. People who belong effortlessly don't have to think about these things. They just are. But for the lonely soul, social interaction is a performance that drains your battery within an hour. So you retreat to recharge. But because your recharging is just isolation, you don't actually gain energy. You just gain more silence. And perhaps the deepest pain of all is the invisibility. There is a specific kind of grief in realizing that if you disappeared for a week, your phone might not ring. It's the realization that you are the one who always initiates the plans. You are the one who remembers birthdays. You are the listener in every friendship, the shoulder everyone cries on. But when you are the one crying, the room is empty. You become a vessel for others' emotions, while yours remain bottled up, fermenting into a bitter vintage of sadness. You are the keeper of secrets, the watcher of worlds, deeply understood by no one. If we stopped here, this would be a tragedy. But we are not going to stop here, because there is another side to this coin. I want to offer you a radical thought. Your loneliness is not a weakness. It is a superpower in disguise. It is raw, unrefined potential energy. Throughout history, the greatest philosophers, the most profound poets, the visionaries, and the healers were almost always people who knew the flavor of loneliness. Why? Because solitude is the incubator of the soul. When you are not constantly distracted by the noise of the tribe, you are forced to confront yourself. You are forced to ask the big questions. Who am I? What is true? What is beautiful? People who are comfortable in the shallow end of the pool never learn how to dive. But you have been treading water in the deep end for years. You have developed muscles they don't have. You have the gift of empathy. Because you know how it feels to be invisible, you are the one who notices the invisible people. You are the one who smiles at the cashier who looks tired. You are the one who asks the quiet person in the group a question to include them. Your pain has carved out a cavern in your heart that can hold the pain of others. You are a healer in training. You have the gift of observation. While everyone else is talking, you are watching. You see the patterns. You understand human nature better than those who are constantly in the center of the mix. You have an outsider's perspective, which is the perspective of the artist and the sage. You have the gift of independence. You have learned to survive in the silence. You have learned to rely on your own mind. This makes you formidable. You are not easily swayed by groupthink or mob mentality. You walk your own path because you have had to walk alone. The goal is not to get rid of your sensitivity. The goal is to transform your loneliness into solitude. What is the difference? Loneliness is the pain of being alone. Solitude is the glory of being alone. Loneliness is saying, I am incomplete without others. Solitude is saying, I am whole within myself, and I welcome others to share in that wholeness. Reframing requires you to stop waiting to be chosen. The lonely child waits on the playground for someone to ask them to play. The empowered adult builds their own playground. Start treating your time alone not as a sentence, but as a date with yourself. Cook yourself the elaborate meal you would cook for a lover. Go to the museum alone and stand in front of a painting for 20 minutes without worrying that you are boring someone else. When you learn to enjoy your own company, a magnetic shift happens. You stop vibrating with the desperate energy of need. You start vibrating with the calm energy of self-possession. And ironically, that is when people are drawn to you. People are attracted to those who are comfortable in their own skin. By stopping the chase, you attract the tribe. So, where do we go from here? I am not going to tell you to go out and join a club. I am not going to give you a list of 10 tips to make friends. You know how to do those things when you are ready. Instead, I want to offer you an invitation to peace. Tonight, when the silence fills your room, try not to fight it. Try not to drown it out with a screen. Imagine that your loneliness is a guest who has knocked on your door. It is a heavy, sorrowful guest, yes, but let it in. Sit with it. Make it a cup of tea. Ask it what it is trying to tell you. You might find that under the cloak of loneliness, there is a desire to create. You might find a desire to help others. You might find a desire to simply rest. There is a beautiful Japanese concept called Kintsugi. It is the art of repairing broken pottery with gold lacquer. The breakage is not hidden, it is highlighted. The cracks become the most beautiful part of the piece. Your loneliness, your cracks, your longing. These are the lines of gold running through your character. They make you rare. They make you beautiful. You are not a mistake. You are a vast, complex universe of thoughts and feelings, waiting for the right telescope to see you. But until that telescope arrives, and it will, you have the privilege of witnessing yourself. You can be your own best friend. You can be the one who understands. Take a deep breath. Feel the beat of your heart. That rhythm has been with you since before you were born, and it will be with you until the very end. You are never truly alone, because you are with yourself, and you are enough.